And we're live. What's going on, YouTube? It's the best show on a Friday night. Welcome to Hockey Stick Talk Nation with your host, Dan, and my special guest tonight, Neil, who is a huge Devils fan, so this should be a fun one. And as always, we want to thank the chat for all coming in, so we'll just give a quick shout out to all the chat that we got in here. So we have Robert Springs, one of the great guys here, so thanks, Robert. We have CCB, one of my good friends over in Alberta. We have IGH Outdoors. Dennis, thanks for coming in. We have Budget Rips. Thanks for coming in, Budget. And we'll give them more shout-outs to more people once they start popping in, as always, too. But as we do here, hey, Dick, coming in, and Maiden, my good friend who lives an hour away from me. So thank you guys for dropping in as well. But before we get the show started, we just got to give a quick shout out to our show's sponsor here. And hey, folks, are you looking for singles for your PC collection or looking to collect a certain player? Why not check out show sponsor tonight, Tsunami Hockeycards, on eBay. Link is in the description. And you can, right now, he has a deal going on using Tsunami Fan September 2nd, where you buy two, you get one free. And also, if you use the code DMHockey88, you save 25% off your purchase as well. So go check him out. He's from Florida, so any little bit helps right now, especially after that hurricane. So I highly recommend you guys go check him out and maybe even buy a thing or two because it helps support his family as well. So really definitely go check him out. And let's dive right in here. So Neil, as I want to say, thank you for coming on the show. Much appreciated. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me on. Sorry, obviously we're doing this a little about 3 hours later than normal. But no, I appreciate the flexibility, and I'm just excited to be on your show, and looking forward to interacting also with everybody in the chat. Which it seems like I'm already getting roasted, and you haven't even asked me a question yet. So there you go.
Yeah, you got
your game isn't as strong as yours, Dan. I do apologize.
No, I guess not. Shout out to Barry and Billum Cards for coming in. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. So Neil, well, I guess we should just dive right in here because you're a Devils fan, I'm a Rangers fan. So I think we're gonna have a really good rivalry this year. Seeing how the Devils are and the Rangers are, I really think
it's going to be fun. I think when you look at where both of these teams are, their expectations going into the season, what they're capable of doing, it's exciting. And it's been a long time coming because I think there was a period of time where maybe the rivalry wasn't as high intense as it is now. And you go back to 2012, to the 2012 conference finals. That was one of those peak, you could say one of those peak, moments in the rivalry's history and just where everything goes. And now that we're in this position, you look at obviously 2 years ago with the Devils and Rangers, first round series. And again, you see where both of these teams are. We're in for some really exciting games between these two rivals. It's a lot of fun. And I think for the NHL, I mean, they're so excited to have two teams, in the Metropolitan Division who are so close in proximity, just, 15, 20 minutes away from one another and basically a river away, that are good. I mean, this is great. And it's a shame that we won't face off until I think early December, I think is the first game. But nonetheless, I'm really excited to see what this year's version of the Hudson River rivalry has in store for us.
Definitely shout out to DJ Wise for coming in. Thanks, DJ. Appreciate it. Definitely. And now that the Devils actually have a goalie, so this goalie battle, I think is really going to be interesting with Shesterkin and Markstrom because I think both are really good. Shesterkin, I think, right now has a higher ceiling because Markstrom's getting on the down a little bit, but he's still an elite goalie. He still can go. I mean, looking at the first game overseas there, he had an unbelievable game, like unbelievable start to the season.
He was tremendous. He would, I think you couldn't ask for a better debut for Markstrom, in his first, real official game as a Devil. He almost got himself a shutout in the first game, which I think would have made it just that much better, but he was phenomenal. And obviously you can't say the same for how things went last night in the Devils home opener against the Leafs, but nonetheless, what Markstrom brings is something the Devils have lacked since even, Corey Schneider back in 2014, and that is, a true number one guy that can come in and make the saves that you need to win games. And when you support him, he comes through and does a lot. And I think that that's what's great about it. And it's such a relief to know that you have a reliable number one goaltender back there. And yeah, even though he's up there in age at 34 years of age, and it's more likely that we're going to see him on the downward swing than obviously staying at that elite level. But if you look at the last handful of cup winning goaltenders, a lot of them are well over the age of 30. I mean, look at Sergei Bobrovsky just last year. He's well over the age of 30 now. And so I think when you look at that, you say to yourself that while it is a risk, it's one that I think the Devils are very much okay with taking because of Markstrom's track record. And he's on a team that has championship aspirations and a really, really solid team around him. And I think for Markstrom, it's only going to be that much more beneficial for him. And then, with Shesterkin, I mean, let's face it, he's arguably one of the top three goaltenders in the NHL right now. He's certainly been in the news the last 24 to 48 hours with the, reported contract that he declined.
Yeah.
This is going to be a really interesting year for Shesterkin because you got to see where the Rangers end up. You wonder to yourself, how many more years of this window does this Rangers core have before they maybe have to start making some of those tougher decisions? It's going to be really interesting to see what ends up happening with Shesterkin, I think. Usually goaltenders, when they're in a contract year, especially in their prime, they tend to end up having a really good year. And I mean, Shesterkin's already off to a good start with a 6-0 shutout in the first game against Pittsburgh. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be fun. When those two guys go up against one another, it's going to be a lot of fun because you have two goaltenders that both could make a run at a Vezina trophy if all things go into place.
Definitely.
And I think you can make an argument that both of these teams are much more even than maybe they were just last year.
Yeah, shout out to Vince, Sportscard Ripping Teacher, for stopping in, and Zach's Collection, a good buddy of mine, for stopping in. He's a Pens fan, but it's okay. It's okay. We know. But no, I've always thought that Shesterkin declined it, and I figured, but I have a feeling he's going to get paid higher than Carey Price's contract. I think it's going to go. I think Carey Price's was 14.5 or something, or 12.5, and I think Shesterkin's might be the 15. I think he wants to be the highest paid, which I think he really deserves. But as a Rangers fan, I do not want to give him that money unless I can give him like top heavy for the first couple years, and then as he declines, kind of so it doesn't hurt the cap as much.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's just a matter of figuring it out, and the Rangers looking at it not only in the short term but in the long term. Because again, I think elite goaltenders come a dime a dozen, and when you have one, you need to try to do everything you can to keep them around for as long as possible. It's kind of like, to use a football analogy, it's kind of like having a really talented rookie quarterback on that rookie contract and knowing that the second you sign him to that rookie deal is when that window opens. Because if you have an elite team around that rookie quarterback, you open up a window of contention for 4 to 5 years of winning a Super Bowl. Unless you're the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes and you give him $500 million.
And you pay the refs.
And you pay the refs. So exactly. It's the new age New England Patriots, everybody. Welcome to the NFL. But with Shesterkin, it would surprise me if he ended up going somewhere else and didn't stay with the Rangers. Even though the salary cap is going up, I think people are over exaggerating with how much the cap per year is going up. People keep saying, "Oh, the cap's going up. This will be fine." Like, it's almost like now people are pushing these problems down the line, which I get in a way if you're still trying to contend. and trying to keep that window open for as long as possible. But at the same time, you got to think to yourself, are you willing to go up that much? Are you willing to make it that much? And I think Shesterkin's going to give it a shot. I don't think he's got much to lose, because if he doesn't get what he wants from the Rangers, he knows that there will be teams out there that will be vying for his services.
Utah.
Yeah, exactly. Could be Utah, could be any team. I would expect the way that I've looked at it for Shesterkin is that if he doesn't choose the Rangers, it's going to be some team out west. I don't know if he would choose another team in the Eastern Conference unless they give him exactly what he wants.
Yeah. Shout out to Yoda for stopping in, and Sticks G, a good buddy of mine, and Julie Farnham, who's a huge Wild fan. So shout out to Julie for stopping in as well. And another great guy here, Alex J's Mix, for stopping in. So I guess now pull up a little slide here I got for you.
Nice.
And we'll talk about this is the top 10 of the Devils this season. I have it top 10 best Devils players. Is there any name on here besides the Hughes brothers and Heischer that really stands out to you that could have a breakout season?
Well, you named the one guy that's in the middle of both of those three players that you mentioned, and that's Jesper Bratt. I think without question, Jesper Bratt could have a breakout year. He's one of the most consistent players that the Devils have had. This is a guy that brings, elite speed, a tremendous wrist shot, and what has been really good by him over the last 2 or 3 years, he's found great ways to avoid getting crunched by, other players. He's able to slip through big time hits, make plays. He had a goal last night in their 4-2 loss to Toronto. This is a guy that can do it all. Another guy that's actually not even on this list is Dawson Mercer of Newfoundland. I mean, he just signed a new 3-year deal to stay in New Jersey. A guy who has, knocked on wood, has still yet to miss a game in his NHL career. He has one of the longest active Ironman streaks in the NHL. This is a kid that finds a way to stay on the ice all the time. And, it's the old saying, the best ability is availability, right? And that's what you're seeing from Dawson Mercer. He's coming off of a tough year. He still ended up with 20 goals, but overall was a pretty disappointing year after a really, really breakout season 2 years ago. And thank you. There you go. We not only do we have Newfoundland, we have specifics. We have Carpenter, Newfoundland. Love that. Very small town. We've learned that it's a very, very small part of Newfoundland that Dawson Mercer comes from. But yeah, no, I look at from this list, I would say Jesper Bratt, but I would also drop in Dawson Mercer as well, for sure.
What about I've seen a lot of people starting to be high on Simon Nemec.
Simon Nemec is a really, really talented defenseman in his own right. This is a guy that can be really good as a very, very good two-way defenseman. So far this year, it's been kind of a slow start for him. But again, this is just his second year in the NHL. And sometimes defensemen, it takes them a while. Whenever defensemen struggle out of the gate in their NHL career, I always use Victor Hedman as a really good example of sometimes guys just take longer to develop. You could say the same thing about a guy like Jack Hughes. You could say the same thing about a guy like Nathan MacKinnon. I've used that example numerous times. Nathan MacKinnon, he wasn't a superstar right off the bat. It took him a while to get going. Now he's one of the top 5 players in the NHL.
You could also use it for Alex Lafreniere.
Lafreniere, great example. Alexis Lafreniere. He comes to a Ranger team that, quite frankly, didn't need him. If we're being honest, at the time, didn't really feel like they needed the first overall pick. He comes in, gets off to a slow start, couple years, and now he's doing very well. Had himself that goal he scored against Pittsburgh 2 nights ago with the toe drag top shelf. Really great goal, and that shows you the maturity of Lafreniere and how much better he's gotten, especially playing under Peter Laviolette. Really, really impressive to see. But going back to Nemec, this is a guy that it might take him a little bit more time to get into, fully into, his body. But I think he shows a lot of talent, and he comes from a country that is on the rise in hockey. From Slovakia, and I think
Yeah.
that it's just he, like a lot of guys, they're learning a new system under Sheldon Keefe. It's going to take time, but overall, very, very talented defenseman that could be, one of your top two guys long term for sure.
Another name that really stands out to me is Brett Pesce. That's a
Mm.
huge pickup for this Devils team.
Yeah.
Especially because Dougie Hamilton has been really injury ridden, and I think Brett Pesce is a nice solid piece that could fill in if Dougie Hamilton does go down.
It's ironic that you say that because Brett Pesce right now is the one that's injured and not Dougie Hamilton. Pesce's still recovering from off-season surgery, and he's still yet to make his Devils debut through 3 games. But again, it looks like in the next maybe game or two that Pesce will be available to play. But yeah, Brett Pesce was the Devils' number one target. They made it clear that they wanted to bring him in because he brings that physical element. He's much more of a defensive defenseman, a guy who has a ton of playoff experience, very reliable back there. And like you said, he could definitely be a guy that can help out for Dougie if he goes down at some point. If he goes right into that second pairing with whomever, I mean that's a really really good look right there. And I think that Tom Fitzgerald wanted to bolster this defense and make it more of a defensive defense. And adding a guy like him, adding a guy like Brendan Dillon, even bringing in Jonathan Kovacevic via trade, I think we're all leaning around, kind of going around the same, reasoning. But it's great. Brett Pesce's a guy that I think overall is going to be a really, really good piece to this team. It's just a matter of him getting fully healthy and getting on the ice and getting acclimated with this team.
And I know we were talking backstage about this player, and I know that you're really high on him, and that's Nico Hischier. Do you expect a big, big year for Nico this year?
I do expect a big year from him because, to put it obvious, he's the captain and he does a great job of leading by example. He's not a big talker. He's more of a guy that, kind of leads by example. He goes out there, plays the game the way it needs to be played. He's tremendous on the face-off dot, a guy that was a Selke Trophy finalist 2 years ago. Super, super talented two-way centerman who can play, in multitude of different ways on the power play. He's been asked to be on the penalty kill several times as well. It's a guy who can do a little bit of everything. And I do expect him, his game continues to mature. He's now getting into the prime of his career. I expect him to have a big year, especially under a Sheldon Keefe offensive system that's in place.
Definitely shout out Cash and Dads. Thanks for coming in, guys. What do you think for the Hughes brothers this year? Do you think big step for Luke and another nice season for Jack?
If they're healthy, I think the sky's the limit for both of them. But I mean that's the big knock on both of them, that they have really really struggled to stay healthy. I mean, with Luke, it's a little bit different because Luke's, this is only his second full season in the NHL. But obviously, having that shoulder injury and having to get surgery is not great. Fortunately, it's not going to take too long for him to recover. I mean, it sounds like maybe early November, second week in November, I think. With Jack, the frustrating thing is that every year it's something. It's some injury that keeps him out for 10, 15 games, and it's frustrating because he got off to such a phenomenal start last year where everybody was already labeling him as the Hart Trophy favorite, playing great. Injures his shoulder, was out for a period of time, never could really get going, I felt, because again, I think the injury maybe, made him a bit more timid. You would like to see him maybe replace some of that speed with a little bit more muscle so that he can find a way to avoid getting hurt. I think the frustrating thing that a lot of Devils fans will tell you is that he spends a lot of time focusing on trying to make these unreal spin moves and stuff like that. And sometimes it works. Sometimes he looks ridiculous and falls over himself, gets hit, turns over the puck, and it's very frustrating. Um, I always expect a big year from Jack Hughes because of the talent that he brings all the time. With Luke Hughes, he's a very talented offensive defenseman. I mean, this is a guy that when he's healthy and rolling, I mean, it's really impressive to see. And he's a big dude. People forget that about Luke. He's 6'2". He's the tallest of the three Hughes brothers, and he's over 200 pounds. He's a big kid. He's not frail like, I mean, to be honest, I think Jack's a bit frail.
Yeah,
And this is coming from a very honest Devils fan. That Jack is a pretty frail player. But I think it's all about them staying on the ice. They got to find ways to stay healthy. They have to be productive. And I told Devils fans, don't like start hitting the panic button if the team gets off to a slow start this year, because again, they're all trying to learn this new system. You have a bunch of new players. This team is not even fully healthy, and we got to see where things go. But with Luke and
definitely.
Jack, I both expect them once they're fully healthy. I mean, Jack's back. Obviously, he has a couple of assists, hasn't scored yet, but it's only been 3 games. Um, I do expect Jack to get going at some point. Same thing with Luke. Um, and they're going to be, main catalysts to this offense for New Jersey.
And then two, I think out of the three Hughes brothers, to be honest with you, and it's not because you're a Devils fan, I really think Quinn Hughes is the all-star out of the three. The way he's played in Vancouver and the way he took over the C there and he leads there, and he's just so steady and so smooth on everything he does. And I just really can't say enough about him as a player and as a defenseman and as a leader there. So I'm wondering if the comparison between Quinn and Luke is going to come eventually.
That's kind of the whole thing here, right? Everybody says it's only a matter of time before, Quinn decides to leave Vancouver and join his brothers in New Jersey. And I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. I don't think it'll happen anytime soon because, Quinn's now the captain of the Canucks. I think he signed a new deal, if I'm not mistaken, or
Yeah, I
he's
think so.
projected to. I think he's happy where he is in Vancouver. And look, the Canucks, very much like the Devils, are on the rise. It's a young team, talented team that really made a lot of noise last year. I mean, they were the best team regular season wise in the Western Conference. And, they got to the second round of the playoffs. They did way more than any of us expected. They were the surprise of the league. And Quinn was a big part of that. And it's really exciting to see all the Hughes brothers making major contributions for the NHL, just to have those three brothers doing it. And
I know we got a good friend of yours sitting
yeah,
here.
Gaza's
Goes
Gaza's great. Whenever I'm live, regardless of where I'm at, Gaza will find me. That's how it goes.
He's a good friend
So
of mine. Big
yeah,
big Rangers fan. I
big
love
Ranger
Goza.
fan from across the pond, as I always call him. And
Yep.
I'm surprised that Gaza's awake since it's probably 3 o'clock in the morning where he is right now over in England. So
He's been DMing me nonstop saying he can't wait for this.
oh, I'm sure he can't wait to constantly make fun of me for the next 45 minutes.
I guess so. My next,
Yeah,
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Go
I was
ahead.
just going to say to finish my point about Quinn. Yeah, I think he's probably the most talented of the three. Um, but again, you're comparing Quinn to at least one forward, and a defenseman that's not fully developed yet. But overall, I think Quinn is a phenomenal player in his own right and a guy that sooner rather than later will win a Norris Trophy.
So now my biggest question for you is, since you've seen a couple games now under Sheldon Keefe, what are your thoughts of Sheldon Keefe? I know in Toronto, and a lot of Toronto fans are probably going to not like this, but I really don't think the Toronto was a fit for Sheldon Keefe. As much as people would like to think, oh, it's Sheldon Keefe or Sheldon Keefe, I think it's actually the players in Toronto, because I think in New Jersey, I think he's really going to excel there. And especially he has a great team around him also. And I think highly of him as a coach. And I think New Jersey is a fit for him.
Yeah, I mean, so far through 3 games, I like what I've seen, and how much Sheldon Keefe demands of his players. You see it on the bench when things are not going well. He's constantly pushing guys to get going. Um, yeah, no, I knew that the Leafs were going to have a much better response against us than what they did against Montreal 2 nights ago, for sure. But with Sheldon Keefe, I'm in the same boat as you, Dan, that he was a good fit personality wise. I felt for the media. I thought he handled it better than any coach in Toronto could handle it, because of how much media scrutiny you're going to get on a day to day basis. It's like with it's their version of the Yankees, right? It's like you have most media and most cameras in your face and all that stuff. And I think in many ways he did as much as he could with that team. I think eventually his message it just wasn't clicking anymore. And I think understandably the two sides had to part ways. But he comes to a Devils team that, in a media world is not as crazy, much more laid back. I mean, there's still high expectations, but it's not as much in your face,
Yeah.
maybe as it was in Toronto. But he has a very talented top six, probably more depth offensively than maybe the Leafs ever had when he was there. I've argued to say a better defensive core than he probably ever had in Toronto, and certainly goaltending. I mean, look, no disrespect, but the best goaltender I think that Sheldon Keefe had in his time in Toronto was probably Freddie Anderson. I mean, granted, you had Jack Campbell that one COVID year have an unbelievable year that turned it into like a big money contract that's now being very regrettable by Edmonton. But I think overall, from the talent standpoint of what Jacob Markstrom and even Jake Allen to an extent brings, I think you can make an argument that this is probably the best goaltending tandem he's had to work with. Um, and so again, you can't judge a coach after 3 games, and there's still a lot of hockey left to play. And again, these guys are learning as we go along here, this system. But so far, I've liked what I've seen. I like the demand of we got to get off to a fast start. We can't have games like we had last night against the Leafs where we're kind of lulling around. We're a step behind and we get exposed. And that's what happened in the first period of last night's game. That was the whole game right there. The whole game was just that. Once the Devils settled in, it was a different game. They were better. They were better than the Leafs. But
Yeah.
it's that slow start that kills them. But overall, with Sheldon Keefe, I think this is a really, really good fit for the Devils for sure.
And I think, too, with him there, he's aligned himself with a lot of good assistant coaches as well. Like coaches that have been there. And
the goaltending coach, Dave Rogalski, can go.
None of us I mean, I think everybody wants us to bring Brodeur as the goaltending coach.
I prefer him to stay where he's at. He's doing just
fine. Shout out to Papa and Baby Bear for coming in. Thank you, guys. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, Marty's one of those guys that you can't really teach what he did because it was so unique. And people have asked him before if he was ever interested in coaching. He's not. He's made that he wants to know. He wants to learn everything about the behind the scenes work, and that's the way that I look at it. And how many games for Markstrom gets a shot for the Devils? Maybe tomorrow, guys. But we'll see what they do against Washington. We'll see.
You always have something.
You played the Penguins. We played the Leafs. What's the difference? I mean, yeah, we had 2 games against the Sabres as well, but it's one game, guys. A lot of hockey left to play for both of us.
So yeah, as we were talking, I think in the New York region there with Buffalo, New York Islanders, New Jersey, I think New York is the mecca like Toronto is here. So
right.
The Rangers are your Toronto pretty much. That's where all the media coverage is. So that's why the Devils, the Islanders, all those guys fall under because they're not getting as much as the Rangers.
You nailed it on the head. That's exactly the way that we look at it. And I think Ranger fans could probably understand where Leafs fans are coming from in terms of that demand. But I also would argue that Toronto is one level above where the Ranger fans are. Because let me put it to you this way. And Dan, you can completely, living in Canada, you understand this completely. In New York, you have a multitude of different sports you can focus on. You obviously have hockey. You have the NBA. You have Major League Baseball. Look at MLB right now. The Yankees and Mets are both one series win away from going to the World Series. You have two basketball teams, professional basketball teams. You have two professional football teams. Granted, they play in New Jersey, but New York. It's New York. In Toronto, no disrespect to the other sports that are in Toronto. I am an Argos fan, by the way. Shout out to the Argo Nation. They're currently playing right now. I don't know what the score is, but I'm keeping my eyes on CFL. I'm a Canadian Football League fan. For fun fact,
Awesome. I'm a Rough Riders fan.
my brother is a Rough Rider fan, so there you go. Love that. But I in Toronto, like the Leafs, for a lot of people, like that's it. They live and breathe and die by it. And if you don't believe me, go ask Steve Dangle. I think that's the prime example. I mean, who writes a book that's titled "This Team is Ruining My Life"? I mean, is that not the definition of where the Leafs are comparatively to a lot of other things? I mean, when the Toronto Raptors won the NBA Finals, how much of the city of Toronto like really went nuts for it?
Yeah.
Like, wait, if the Leafs win a cup, that city's going to burn to the ground. And in the good way, not the Vancouver Canucks in 94 and 2011 way.
Definitely.
The good way. The Islanders are Ottawa and Jersey is Hamilton. I'm confused by this joke.
So like the Ottawa Senators like get like 0 cup. They're on the TSN channel, so that's like the worst channel. And then Hamilton is like the Islanders to the Rangers. So there's been rumors that Hamilton wants to get an NHL team, and that's like Toronto's rival throughout everything. So Hamilton, I just want to give a shout out to Maple Leafs. I don't like the 34.
Tiger Cats. I do not like the Tiger Cats, people. I am not a fan of that team one bit. I will say though, Tim Hortons Field, that's about as Canadian of a name of a stadium as I've ever seen. Gonna be honest with you. But yeah, no, I think overall, for Sheldon Keefe, I think it's gonna be a lot better for him. And he's a very motivated coach. I think the biggest reason why they lost last night was that pressure that, Sheldon Keefe's coaching against his former team for the first time. The real stressor is going to be the first time the Devils go to Toronto.
Yeah.
That's going to be – it was different last night because the Devils are at home. The pressure is going to be – Dougie Hamilton talked about it last night, pressure to win for, Sheldon. Wait till they go to Toronto.
Yeah.
There's the pressure.
Because the media is going to be the media.
He's going to be fine. Sheldon's going to handle it easily. Yeah. He did it for 5+ years. He can do it. Him dealing with the media now is a breeze. This is a cake for him. This is great. He's in a small market. Let's call it like it is. The Devils played a small market. It's just fair and plain and simple. This is a cakewalk. He has to deal with NJ.com, New Jersey Hockey Now, the Hockey News, the Hockey Writers, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. He doesn't have to go on any radio stations, no television station, nothing. Until they win. Once they win, then he'll be on all of those.
Yeah.
Other than that, none of the radio stations in New York will have him on their show.
Shout out to Frank's Cards and Collectibles coming in. Frank is a huge Marty Brodeur fan.
Love that.
Huge Marty Brodeur fan.
Love that, Frank.
He's on the show tomorrow night, so stay tuned for that.
Awesome.
So I guess now we'll dive in a little bit to predictions here. So I see the Rangers really coming out top of the Atlantic, and I see the Devils. I see them like steady, like second or third, maybe even fourth, but I see them right there. I think these are the top two teams for the Atlantic really coming out.
I agree. When I did my predictions for the upcoming season last week, I had the Devils finishing in second in the Metro behind the Rangers. I just think that the Rangers, with the amount of experience and chemistry they have with that team, I think is just a notch above where the Devils are. Because again, while the Devils are talented, they are learning a new system. with a bunch of new players. So they're going to have moments of like where they look really great, like the first two games we saw against the Sabres over in Prague. Then you're going to have games like you had last night against Toronto, where you don't look as good. You look more confused. You look sluggish, blah, blah, blah. But I still think the Devils are going to be up there. I think the top three teams in the Metro right now are the Rangers, the Devils, and the Hurricanes. I think that's the way that I look at it. It'll be interesting to see where Carolina is this year with how much they lost in the offseason. But I think overall, the Rangers, Devils is top two in the division for sure.
Speaking like a true Leaf, or Leafs that too.
There you go. Rangers 1, Leafs 2, Florida 3.
This one is actually pretty good because I don't see Florida. I see them dropping this year. I don't see them really contending this year.
It all depends on the health. I mean, Barkov, unfortunately, is already hurt for the Panthers. They had a tough loss last night to Ottawa. There might be that Stanley Cup hangover, which happens. Nobody will criticize them for having that because it's tough. It's tough to repeat. It's very tough to repeat. I still think this is a team that's going to make the playoffs. Winning the division, I don't see, but I certainly think they finish as a top three team in the Atlantic. I just think they're too good not to be in that position.
I know a lot of people that I've been seeing, like for prediction-wise, has the Oilers and the Rangers in the finals, which I can see the Oilers because I think McDavid this year is going to be on another level because he tasted it, and I think we're going to see a real, even more dangerous McDavid. Because last year it was just, oh, here's some assists. I think this year he's going to full tilt, and I think we're going to see like a driven McDavid, which I think is going to be really scary for the NHL.
I think people are waiting for that McDavid / Gretzky like playoff year for McDavid. I think that's the way that they're what everybody's hoping for. And like you said, McDavid now has that experience. He got all the way to the finals and didn't get it done. And it's very hard to get back once you've gotten that opportunity. But I think the Oilers are battle tested. And, obviously if they don't have a game like they did last, 2 nights ago when Skinner gave up like 5 goals, they'll be all right. I think goaltending, I mean, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but again, goaltending is going to be the question mark for me with Edmonton.
Yeah.
Is Skinner actually going to be that number one guy? I do not know. Because at some point the Oilers got to lock down a number one guy. That's the way I look at it. But I think overall, if McDavid gets back in the playoffs, I think he's going to be even more determined to get it going. And the NHL would love an Oilers-Rangers series because you have the best player, arguably the top 2 best players in the NHL, against the biggest media market in the NHL.
Yeah.
That will attract a lot of people to watch.
Shout out Dr. Mantis for coming in. Thank you. Appreciate it. So talk a little about the Devils. Let's talk a little bit about the Rangers. So I think the Rangers might have one of the deadliest lines in the NHL this year with Laffy, Trocheck, and Panarin. Last year, they were I was amazed every time that line came on because you got scoring, you got passing, you got Laffy, who's now became a power forward threat, which is really great to see. And you also you can throw that line out against any line. And Trocheck, he was number 2 in the league for faceoffs behind Crosby.
It was, when you look at that line, if you had told Rangers fans at the beginning of last year that was going to be one of the most impressive lines in the NHL, I don't think anybody would have believed them. I don't think they would have even said that you're going to pair Trocheck and Lafreniere with Panarin. But Trocheck had a phenomenal year last year. He really surprised a lot of people. He's way more talented than I think people give him credit for. Lafreniere, we talked about earlier tonight, a guy who is just developing into a really, really talented goal scorer. And Panarin is Panarin. The question that I have is not of really Lafreniere or Trocheck, but it is of Panarin. Because again, to being honest, he didn't really step up in the playoffs. And that's going to be a knock on him. you know this very well. Didn't get his first goal of the series against the Panthers until the last game of the season. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not good. That's not good that happened. And he's getting paid $10+ million per year right now. I think for the Rangers, that line's going to be great in the regular season. What's gonna be the deciding factor is, can they have that sustained success once you get to the playoffs? But it's a very, very talented line, a line that you would not expect to be super successful, but usually the great lines are of the players bonding together that you least expect.
And like me as a Rangers fan, I would trade Zibanejad right now and put Trocheck in as my number one center. And that's me speaking as a Rangers fan. I just think more highly, and I have more confidence in Trocheck than I do Mika Zibanejad.
Yeah. And
I mean, Zibanejad, yeah,
Zibanejad's another guy.
You can put him out in anything, but you can do that with Trocheck.
You do
And I
with
just
Trocheck.
feel he's more defensively reliable than Zibanejad.
And you know what? I've always liked Mika Zibanejad. I always felt that at times he was not as appreciated at times, but he, like Panarin, again, once the playoffs come around, they disappear, and they don't like. And it's one of those things, and I've said this many times about the Rangers. They have been very blessed that they were able to go from Henrik Lundqvist to Igor Shesterkin. You go from one phenomenal, now Hall of Fame goaltender to a guy that is on a Hall of Fame trajectory right now. And you're not giving the consistent factor, you're not giving that guy enough goal scoring support. Throughout the many years that Lundqvist was bailing out the Rangers, they were not scoring. Even in 2014 when they made the finals, were they really that dominant of an offensive team? No. No, it was because Martin St. Louis was rolling. You had Henrik Lundqvist playing a phenomenal playoff year. Shesterkin, just last year, a big deciding factor in a lot of those games. They were low scoring games because Shesterkin had to make 40+ saves a night. Hell,
Yeah.
go back to just 2 nights ago. The Rangers won after getting outshot. They won 6-0. Like, at some point, the Rangers have to find a way to get more goal support, especially in the playoffs. And that might be the reason why Shesterkin maybe doesn't stay in New York. Maybe he gets fed up with it all and says,
And
"As much I want to get paid, but also I want to win something." You
and to
know?
your point there, I think one player that is really, if hopefully he makes it and hopefully he stays, and I think could really be a playoff game changer, and that's Brandon Offman.
Mm.
Because I watched him play and he can score goals. And that's what the Rangers need. They need players to score goals. And I am super high on Brandon Offman. And I really hope that he can stay in the NHL because I think he's going to be deadly and he'll be a playoff performer. And same with Hedel. We didn't have Hedel all year last year.
You didn't have Hedo at
Hedel
all.
was our
Really,
number
like what,
two
one
center.
game and then got hurt again?
Yeah. So, and Kako hopefully takes a big turn this year. Hopefully, but I think
That's a
Kako
trade
is
deadline
Kako.
player if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, I think he's Kako. That's it.
That's
Thanks for Callie and Jordan showing up. Thank you guys. But a player that I really think is going to be great, and especially if we get rid of Truba, and super high on him, and I have all the faith in the world in him, and that's Keandre Miller. Like,
Yeah.
he showed a lot of good flashes last year.
And he's a big dude. He's a big dude that has really, really good puck handling skills. Really talented coming out of college. A guy that I think doesn't get talked about enough because of the fact that he plays in the lower half of the defense, but is a guy that's developing every year. He gets a little bit better every year. It's not like this very obvious, like he's getting really good, better and better. but it's more like this gradual pace of him getting better. I think the one thing I would like to see improved on his end is to block shots a little bit more. And you would expect a guy that big to be able to block shots. It's funny, sometimes with these big defensemen, they kind of don't always like think that like blocking a shot or like learning how to properly block a shot, because they're like, well, I'm so big that I'm going to block anyway.
I just gotta say this, Callie? What happened to Pittsburgh? That's what I thought.
There you go. But yeah, no, he's really, really good. And a guy that also is a guy that brings some speed. He can really, really bring, he brings the puck up well. I think overall he's a really, really solid defenseman.
And I mean, too, not many people know this, but Keonre Miller played forward for all of his career until he went to college, and he just learned the defense position when he was in college. So he's still, if you think about it, he's still learning that position as he's playing.
Right, exactly.
And not a lot of people know that he was a forward before he went to college, and they transitioned him to a defenseman. But one defenseman I cannot say enough about, and hopefully we can get him long term, because I think of him as the heart and soul of the Rangers, and that's Ryan Lindgren. That guy puts his body on the line every night, blocking shots, and he is the heart and soul of that Rangers team.
He is a guy. I made a joke last year that he's just like a walking Red Cross symbol, because the amount of time, it seems like every year he makes a big block or whatever, and then he's hurt. He has like a torn labrum. He blew out his knee. Like, this guy throws his body out all the time for the sake of winning. And he would be a guy that I'm sure for Rangers fans, if they win the cup, he would be like one of the first guys that would want to give the cup to, because of just, he embodies what it means to do everything possible to win a hockey game. And you would hope that he can really stay healthy, still be able to do those things, but find a way to stay healthy, because him being on the ice for those crucial games in the playoffs is so valuable to that Ranger team. He might be their best defensive defenseman by far. And I agree with you that he's very much the heart and soul of that team. Who knows? Maybe he should have been the captain over Jacob Trouba.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe he will when they trade Trouba, hopefully. But I think, too, the great thing now is, not a lot of people like it, but I think having Quick as the backup kind of helps save Igor a little bit more, because we have that steady veteran in there that can win us games.
Yeah, and Jonathan Quick had a really, really good year last year. I mean, we all can say the same thing, that when Shesterkin was going through his struggles last year, Jonathan Quick came in and was great. I mean, he was a big reason why the Rangers had the year that they did. And I think a big part of it is the fact that Jonathan Quick, from Connecticut, grew up a Ranger fan. He finally gets an opportunity to play for his hometown team and gets to be at Madison Square Garden.
And that's a little bit more pride in you to want to.
Exactly. There's that little bit of extra emotional motivation right there to get it, to do your best. And I think that he has been really, really solid for the Rangers. I think you can say he's been one of the best backups the Rangers have had in quite some time. I think the last time I couldn't even tell you probably the last time the Rangers had a really solid number two.
Yes, they're well. I guess
maybe.
I guess it would be Lundqvist backing up Mike Richard.
Yeah, you could make that argument for sure. Right at the end of Richter's career, yeah, you could make that argument. But it's like when Tom Brady was the backup to Drew Bledsoe for about 5 minutes. Right.
But so, I don't think anybody's more beloved in any NHL city than Henrik Lundqvist in New York.
Yeah.
He is one of the goalies who I think really deserved a cup. And I was kind of, when he got traded to Washington, I was kind of hoping that he would have at least got a cup. But I mean, he's one goalie who I absolutely love, and I wish he won a cup. I wish we could trade him to somewhere that was going to go to a cup just so we could get it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for him that he was never able to lift the Stanley Cup. It's a guy that was one of the best goalies of this past generation, a guy who, you know, was so talented. And, he was a late round draft pick. Nobody knew who he was. He wasn't this highly touted guy. He comes to the Rangers. He embraces the city right away. He embraces the honor to play for the New York Rangers, and he does everything he can to deliver success. And it's a guy that really embraced being in New York, and just being a part of the Rangers. Um, and he does a great job as an analyst now. And he's going to go down as one of the greatest Rangers players of all time. And he's going to be looked at as one of the greatest goaltenders in Rangers history. And being the goaltender of the New York Rangers is almost like being, like the shortstop of the New York Yankees. It has that same type of, respect. It has that same type of honor, and pressure. And
Yeah.
Lundqvist, I think, to his credit, lived up to that pressure for many, many years. It's just unfortunate that the Rangers could just never get it done. And it was unfortunate that due to, his heart, that he was never able to really get it going with the Washington Capitals, and at least try to continue his career to try to win a cup.
So now I guess we're going to jump into some news, and we'll talk a little bit about some news that we got going on here. So the one big thing I'd like to really dive into is the Jeremy Swayman contract. I am still iffy on this, but I mean, I wouldn't want Korpisalo as my starter goalie anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, and then it's funny because Swayman signed this deal, but Linus Ullmark signed the exact same deal in Ottawa. So my question is for you. We got Swayman signing for 8 years, $66 million. I think it is. Yeah, $66 million. I wonder where this is going to leave Jake Ottinger, because he's right in the middle of Shesterkin and Swayman.
It's all going to depend on the type of year that Jake Ottinger has. I think that the Stars, they've been a really talented team for the last couple of years, a team that has been close. And I think some people have even predicted that they would get to the finals the last couple of years, but haven't gotten it done. Ottinger had a tough year last year. It was kind of up and down for him. This is a good opportunity for him to bounce back. And, once you start getting these contracts, especially for guys who might be talent-wise above him, you can start to come up with a pretty good deal that you could get a good amount of money for. And you look at the way things went with Swayman. They were he and his agent, they remained steadfast, and they, made sure that they got what they wanted. And, Swayman got the contract. I think he deserves it because I think he's that talented. And I still think the Bruins need to find a way to get another backup goaltender right now, because I don't think Korpisalo is going to be a reliable number 2.
And then we never want to see this, but good on Jack Campbell for going into the player assistance program.
Yeah.
That takes a big thing to do. I know, even talking about mental health or anything like that, it's a big step in anyone's life. So we just want to say all the best to Jack Campbell, because that takes a lot, even for an NHL player. Like, we don't see what goes on behind the scenes of them. We just see them on the ice or in an interview here and there, but we don't see what's really going on. So we never want to see that, but we're glad that he's getting the right help that he needs.
100%.
And then Sorokin, that's another great goalie on just a bad team. He's doing everything he can to be ready for game 1 after back surgery. I don't know if he played or not, but he's another really underrated goalie, and he's just on a bad team.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough for Sorokin. We now understand why he had such a tough year last year dealing with all of that back pain. And that's the livelihood for a goaltender. Again, like you said, he's on a team that, is good enough to make the playoffs, but lacks goal support, lacks a lot of talent, quite frankly. It's a much older team. And, I'm sure the Islanders are fortunate that they were able to lock him down to a long-term deal last year and not have him go to free agency. But you got to find a way, especially when you have Sorokin. You don't know how many great years you have left with him, especially coming off of back surgery. It's it's tough, and hopefully Sorokin can come back from this strong, and he can have a good year and help the Islanders get back to the playoffs and hopefully a long run for them.
And then another one that I don't know how Vegas does it, but they always get money from long-term IR. It's the IR team of the NHL. Leonard won't count against the Golden Knights cap this season.
I mean, is that really on the Golden Knights? Is it really their fault that Leonard's in this position and he went bankrupt and all that? It's not really on them. So
Yeah.
like this time around, you could kind of give him a break for that. Hopefully for Robin Leonard, things can get to a level where you know he's not in this position anymore because it's crazy to think he's still technically an NHL player. Um, but yeah, that's kind of where
And
I have
then
to say about
this
it.
one I was really looking forward to see this kid play, and that's
Yeah.
Ryan Reinbacher out
Yep.
5 to 6 months after knee surgery. I was really looking forward to see him play with Montreal.
Crushing blow for a young Habs team looking for things to get excited about for a team that's on the rise slowly. Reinbacher was a guy that I think a lot of people, like you said, were hopeful to see, and it's unfortunate that he'll be out for a good amount of time.
Then another good one. I thought this was a really good signing by Columbus, and that's getting Kevin LeBlanc for 1 year for 775. That is a great signing because Kevin LeBlanc is a great player.
He had a phenomenal training camp with the Devils. He finished with 6 goals. Was on a 3-game goal streak to end the preseason, and his last preseason game, he had a hat trick. I mean, he had as good of a PTO as anybody has ever had as a PTO, and he earned that contract with Columbus. The Devils wanted to sign him to the same thing, but they had to send him down to Utica originally, to go through waivers. Blue Jackets didn't have to do that, so I get why he signed in Columbus. But good deal for the Blue Jackets.
And then another good signing too, and bringing back to the same team is Jacob Verana 1 year on a PTO for 775 to the Caps. I think that's a good signing because Verana is still a good player and he's still speedy.
Yeah, for sure. He can still bring some of that speed and a little bit of scoring as well. And he has some familiarity playing with a lot of these guys in the Caps. It's a really good match for both sides.
And then another great one is for the Flyers signing, or they made Luchenko become the youngest player in team history on the Flyers, which is great to see a young player, especially under John Tortorella, because he is not high on young players. But I still think John Tortorella is one of the most underrated coaches in the NHL.
Yeah, no, and it's one of those things where it's always great to see a little bit of history that kind of comes in, and being as young as he is, it's pretty remarkable. That a player that young is going to have an opportunity to play, in the NHL. So good on him.
And then another one, I know Julie's not here. She might still be, but the Wild signing Jesper Wallstedt did 2 year extension for $2.2 million. I think that's a big signing right there, especially with Fleury saying this is his last year.
Yeah, and I think the only interesting thing is that 2.2 million seems a little bit much for a kid who's only played 3 games so far in the NHL. But I think the good news is you at least know that you extended him. You keep him around for a little bit longer. Give yourself more time to really let this kid go and develop. It'll be really interesting to see how much of an opportunity he gets moving forward.
And then another great signing for the Canucks, signing Hoglander to a 3 year, $9 million extension. That was a great one.
Really, really simple extension right there. 3 year, 3 million per year for a guy that is slowly, and steadily developing into a really solid top 6 player. I expect him to get an uptick in scoring this year. A guy that I think, can really, really become a guy that you can rely on to score 30 plus goals a year once he's in his prime. So again, getting the for the Canucks, getting him signed to a very cheap extension for a kid that's still yet in his prime, I think is going to be a big steal for them.
Then the last one is the trade. Or Brandstrom. Like, honestly, he gets traded to Ottawa to Colorado. Then Colorado goes to the Canucks, and then the Canucks waive him.
Yeah, that's one of those things that's really tough because you're in that situation of player where you don't really know what your next step is, and now you go from you're traded, now you're getting waived, now you're not on a team at all.
Yeah,
right now, and the direction is not clear. But I think he's going to probably end up being on their minor league team, and hopefully he can kind of get himself on a little bit of a bounce back. I think that's the hope. So we'll see.
definitely. So, does anybody have any questions for Neil while we're here? We'll give it chat a couple minutes. So I asked everybody this. So, if you had to pick a Mount Rushmore for the Devils, past or present, what would your 5 Mount Rushmores be?
My 5 Mount Rushmores would be, I'd put Marty Brodeur up there for sure. I'd put Sergey Brylin up there. Scott Stevens, Ken Danico, and Scott Niedermayer. So basically, I named all of the players except one who have their jersey retired by the Devils. And I think that Sergey Brylin doesn't get enough credit. He was on all 3 Stanley Cup teams, the only guy to win all 3 cups that's not, doesn't have, his name in the rafters. He is in the Ring of Honor, which is good. And he's an assistant coach, with the Devils. So, he gets to, make impacts. He's been with the Devils for so long now in the organization. But I think all of those guys, understandably, are guys who made the biggest impacts on shaping this New Jersey Devils organization.
And then Dig has a question: why Jersey?
Why Jersey? In terms of what? Like, why do I like the Devils? Why am I a fan?
I would assume that's what he means.
Yeah.
Why do you like them?
Born and raised in New Jersey, in a small little town in Monmouth County, and got a chance to watch Marty Brodeur in his prime. I fell in love with the sport watching him and watching that team. Wasn't conscious enough to remember the Stanley Cup years, but I got to see Marty play for many years. That 2012 season, I know for someone like Dan, it's a year that they'd rather forget. But as a Devils fan, you're always going to look back and think fondly of, despite not winning the cup. And I stay very true to my local teams whenever I can, and that's where and that's why Jersey. I guess is the answer.
And Stix G says, "Who's your favorite player currently?"
This is always an interesting question because I always say that I always go with this. My favorite current player on the Devils right now, if I were to go like team in an NHL, Devils is Nico Hischier for sure. My favorite player currently in the league is David Pastrnak. I absolutely love his game. When there was the possibility that he was going to leave in free agency and the Devils were one of the top destinations for him, I would have gone crazy if the Devils had been able to get David Pastrnak. I still have yet to get his jersey, but I definitely want to get one at some point. But he's a guy that every chance I get an opportunity to go see him play, I do. Because he's a big-time scorer. I love that he wears 88. It's awesome. Really love it.
It's cool. Dig says, for question 2.
Sleeper pick on the Devils. Well, as mentioned before, I'm going to go with Dawson Mercer. I think that he's primed to have a really big bounce back year. Maybe he gets to 25 goals. Maybe he pushes 30 if all things are going well. I think that he's a guy that really has the opportunity to take a big step this year and get going.
All right. I just want to let everyone know, remember, check me out Sunday nights on the Sunday Night Card Show with Maiden and Tim with my top 5 picks there every week. So make sure you go check us out. And what about Pat Verbeek, Maiden says?
Pat Verbeek, is one of those guys that, he had he had a good impact in the early days in the New Jersey Devils. And that he had some good success, helped the Devils get off the ground, and I'm sure he's going to do really good things as a GM with the Anaheim Ducks.
And then we wouldn't have the great show if this wasn't brought up. Thoughts on Elvis Stoico? He's a figure skater for Canada. Yeah. He's one of Canada's greatest figure skaters. So it's always gets brought up.
Hard sport that I respect anybody that does it. I'll just say that.
So great. As a custom here, Neil, on this show, as we close out, we let the guest close it out as if they were closing out their own show. So as a custom on the hockey show, we're going to let you close out the show tonight.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for having me on tonight. This was great. Loved talking with you and interacting with everyone here in the chat. Really appreciate it. Yeah, you can check out, my podcast, the Devil State of Mind podcast. I'm on YouTube. So if you guys want, you can go right over to Devil State of Mind. I'm currently close to getting to 100 subscribers. I'm at 82 right now. Would really appreciate if you guys could slam a follow. I'm also on Twitter at Devil State. I'm on Instagram at Devil State of Mind, and I also do have a Facebook page as well, Devil State of Mind podcast. I also do some writing as well. I cover the Devils for Pucks and Pitchforks via Fansided. Just posted a new article about Jacob Markstrom yesterday. So make sure you go check out all of my articles written over there. And yeah, if you click on the link tree that's in either on Instagram or Twitter, you can
check out. And I have your stuff in the description as well. So
yeah,
you guys
so
can check
it out in the description as well. Just listen, if you're on Apple or Spotify, I'd love it if you could, leave me a 5-star review. Same thing with Dan. Really does help out the podcast a lot. And I do have podcast merch out, which you can check on my socials. All proceeds go to breast cancer research. So if you want to support the podcast, make sure you go check that out as well. And again, Dan, thank you so much for having me on tonight. This was great. Problem. And I look forward to continuing to interact with you. Definitely. And everyone in the chat here as well.
And guys, make sure, let's go get him to 100 tonight. I know you all can. So go over there and sub him up. Let's get him to 100. Tell him I sent you. So that way he knows who you are. And thanks, Tim, for coming. A little bit late, but we always appreciate you no matter what, buddy. So, as always, everyone, this is Dan. This is Neil. This is the Hockey Talk Nation. And we are out. Have a great night.